Hello. This morning we're going to continue with the theme we started last week. Chosen. Last week we heard how Jesus chose his disciples to follow him, just as he calls us to follow him. Today we're going to think about somebody else, somebody who was born long before Jesus, and his name was David. When we first hear about David, he's just a small boy, and he had 7 big brothers. Can you see them? All the big brothers, and here's little David all by himself. They didn't really have time for him because he was too small. And apart from that, they were always busy because they worked on their farm and they had lots of jobs to do. But David didn't have any jobs because he was too small. And so he was a little bit lonely and he wished he could do something. Anyway, one day his dad realised how David felt. And so he said to him, David, I've got a job for you. I would like you to look after our sheep on the hillsides. Do you think you could do that? Oh, yes, said David. I would love to do that. And off he went, day after day, looking after the sheep on the hillside. And he loved it. And he got to know the sheep by name and he would talk to them. And he was a very, very good shepherd. But sometimes he got a little bit lonely with just the sheep to talk to. And so he started to make up songs. And he had his little harp. And when he wasn't busy looking after the sheep, he would play his harp and sing his songs to God. And we can still do that today because they're in the Bible, in the book of Psalms. And the most famous one, of course, is the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And it finishes, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And David believed that. But he not only sang songs, he used to talk to God. He loved talking to God, and God loved to listen and to talk to him. And David became very close to God. In fact, so close that God once said that he had a heart like himself. Isn't that wonderful? But one day something very strange happened. A very important gentleman came, and he was the high priest, a bit like our Archbishop of Canterbury. Mind, he never comes to see us, but you can watch him on the television sometimes. And he was very important, and God had told him to do a very special job. And he had to look for a very special person to take over from King Saul, who had been a little bit naughty, and God was very unhappy with him. And he wanted somebody different, somebody special to take over as king. So the high priest, whose name was Samuel, was sent to see Jesse, David's dad. And he said, I've come here to find someone special. Have you got any sons? Oh, yes, he says, I've got lots of sons. Well, do you think I could meet them and see if they're the right ones? So David's dad, Jesse, sent for the eldest one. Well, not tell you names because they're a bit confusing. He sent for the eldest one. He was big and strong, very handsome. And Samuel thought, looks, this is going to be an easy job. This is definitely the one that God is going to pick. But God said something funny to Samuel. He said, no, that's not the one I want. Oh, so Samuel says, have you got any more? Oh, yes. So Jesse sent for the second son. And he came. Wasn't quite as tall, but he was still very strong looking and good looking. And Samuel thought, this looks promising. But before he could even think it hardly, God said, No, that's not the one I want. And Samuel thought, oh, this is not going to be as easy as I thought. So Jesse sent for the next son. And sure enough, he came a little bit shorter, still strong and handsome. And Samuel thought, don't panic yet, Samuel. This could be it. But God said, no, that's not him either. So Jesse sent for another son. Number 4. And he was much younger, but he still looked very good, and he was quite strong. And Samuel thought, perhaps this one. What do you think? Of course, God said, no, I don't want him either. That's not what I'm looking for. Number 5 came along. And Samuel thought, well, they're getting a bit young now. But well, I suppose he might grow into something more like his big brother. That would be okay. But once again, God said, nope, that's not the one I want. But poor Samuel was getting a bit worried by this time. And he thought, I must trust in God. He definitely sent me here. So along came son number 6. Well, he was getting a lot smaller. You can see, can't you? He's a lot smaller. And Samuel waited. I'm not going to say anything this time, so I'm just going to wait and see what God does. And sure enough, God said to Samuel, no, Samuel, that's not the one I want either. So Jesse says, well, I've only got this one left, and he's quite young, but he's strong, and he's willing. And Samuel thought, well, it's got to be him because we've seen all the sons. But sure enough, God said, no, that's not him either. Well, by this time, Samuel was getting really worried. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, sure, 7 sons. All very good, all good looking, very strong. Make a good king. But you know, something else that's said in the Bible, that God doesn't just look at the outside, he looks at the inside. He looks at our hearts. He sees what kind of people we really are. So Samuel said to Jesse, are you sure this is all your sons? Have you not got any more? So Jesse said, well, there's our David, but he's just a boy. He's out minding the sheep. So Samuel said, well, could you send for him and could I meet him? So Jesse sent for David. And David came. Little shepherd boy, carrying one of his sheep, maybe one that had got lost and he was just taking a bit extra care. Because God does that sometimes with us, doesn't he? And as soon as David came and Samuel saw him, God said, yes, this is the man I want you to anoint as the next king of Israel. Gosh, that was a shock, wasn't it? But you know, David might just have been a shepherd boy. And we might think that we are very small and insignificant. But you know, God has a job for us. It might not be king, but it'll be something special for God, even though we're very small. David didn't become king till he grew up. And God worked with David so that David was ready and prepared. And God does the same for us. David was born to be king. But you know, it also says in the Bible that we are God's children and that we are family with Jesus, who is the King of Kings. So we are royalty in a way, not earthly royalty. We are much, much better than that. We are God's royalty as well. And then one day, when we meet him, we will wear a crown. Isn't that wonderful? What a wonderful story. So just remember, if you're feeling a little bit down or a little bit insignificant, don't worry. God's got a job for you. He's got a place for you in his plan. And he wants you to be part of his family and to receive your crown.